1 minute. Okay, thank you. Hello everybody and a very warm welcome to Monza for the 13th race of the 2012 International GT Open season. We're here at the legendary Italian circuit just outside Milan as we are getting ready for the penultimate round of the year. We've just got the 2 races here at Monza, then 2 races at Barcelona to come, and things couldn't be tighter in the championship. It's been a brilliant year's racing thus far, and I'm sure we're in for 2 excellent races this weekend here at Monza. In the commentary box, as ever, it's myself, Ben Evans. Alongside me is the sports car and GT racer, Duncan Tappy. And Duncan, you raced here a little bit earlier on in the year in very wet weather. Today, it's been raining on and off, but the drivers now come to the track in almost the worst possible conditions, damp but drying.
Exactly. This is quite possibly the worst conditions that you'd want here. You know, it's been raining, it's now drying up a little bit, and it's greasy. It's really not the ideal drive conditions, but it's also challenging, so it's going to be interesting to watch.
Certainly will be. In qualifying this morning, it was the championship leader, Jimmy Bruni, who put the AF Course Ferrari on pole position alongside him on the front row of the grid. This driver currently lies 4th in the standings. That's Andrea Montermini. There is Jimmy, just conferring with the AF Course team here on the grid. And the reason that Jimmy Bruni is leading coming into this weekend is that following on from the Hungaroring, the appeals that were outstanding from Paul Ricard were upheld, and that meant the loss of points for the Velois, Aston Martin, Navarro Barra and Matteo Malicelli, and also for Andrea Montermini and Juan Manuel Lopez in the Vallorba Course Ferrari. So they have slipped down the standings. It means that Federico Leo and Jimmy Bruni lead the championship by just 1 point from Nick Tandy and Marco Holzer with 4 races to go. If you've not seen the International GT Open before, then this is what you've got to look forward to. There's 2 races each weekend, and today is the longer 70-minute race. All the races have a mandatory pit stop. That comes between 40 and 60% of race duration, and there are 2 classes: the Super GT class, which is broadly speaking GT2 cars, and the GTS class, which is again broadly speaking GT3 cars, but it runs to International GT Open regulations, so there are some changes from the FAA specifications. 3rd on the grid, you just caught a glimpse of him there, Daniel Zampieri. He was the first of the GTS qualifiers this morning, 3rd on the grid. Remarkable performance from Daniel, who has been one of the stars of the championship this year. He really is a spectacular driver. 4th on the grid then is Miguel Ramos, who claimed such a dramatic victory in the 70-minute race at the Hungaroring last time out, and the Corvette, piloted by Miguel Ramos and Rafael Gia Maria, has looked formidable in free practice over the course of the weekend. And I think if the conditions dry out a little bit, then certainly that car is very much in the equation for claiming overall victory. If the conditions worsen, then you wouldn't bet against maybe an upset from some of the GTS cars. The second of the GTS cars on the grid is Lorenzo Bontempelli. He qualified that car 6th earlier on. Bontempelli, one of the most effervescent characters in the field. And the GTS cars, Duncan, the principal difference in the wet weather between them and the Super GTs is they have got ABS brakes, which we saw this morning on a greasy and damp track in qualifying was absolutely crucial.
Yeah, ABS is kind of like a lifeline in conditions like this. It really kind of enables you just to hit the brake as hard as you possibly can. There's really no finesse involved there, so it limits the factor that you might lock up and go off. It really does help you.
Fifth on the grid then is Ramon Narak in the IMSA Performance Matmut Porsche, and that has qualified in fifth. One of their best performances really for quite some time in qualifying. They've had a couple of bad rounds, but whatever they've done with the setup of that car has been very, very important. So let's take a look then at the starting grid with Jimmy Bruni in pole position, Andrea Montermini alongside him on the front row, Daniel Zampieri and Miguel Ramos in row 2, with Ramon Narak and Lorenzo Bontempelli completing the third row. On to row 4, Alvaro Barber in the Villois Aston Martin, Adam Christodoulou in the McLaren, who again went superbly well. Cesar Ramos only in his second meeting in the National GT Open in 9th, and Philip Petter, his Kessel Racing teammate, in 10th. Nick Tandy, who lies second in the championship standings, could only manage 11th, just ahead of Emanuele Moncini. Auto Orlando Sport up all night rebuilding a car for Archie Hamilton, and he rewarded them with 14th. Iraj Alexander putting together one of his best performances of the year to date, qualified in 15th with Stefano Pizzari in 16th. Gianluca De Lorenzi in the Mercedes SLS, a very welcome addition to the grid this weekend, as is Wim Almeida and Enrique Bonaldi in another Super GT specification Ferrari 458. The car's off on the formation lap. It is, as ever in the National GT Open, a rolling start. So they'll head around on the formation lap, then form up side by side. Pace car will peel in. The red lights will flash out, and we'll be racing here for 70 minutes at Monza. And that means, Duncan, this is the last opportunity for these drivers just to get a feel for where the grip is around this legendary track.
Exactly, that they're going to be feeling and looking for every little bit of grip out there, trying to get as much temperature in the brakes. As we saw in the race before, they were going offline to cool down the tyres as much as possible. So I can imagine they will be starting on wets, but soon enough they're going to be having to really stay on top of the condition of those tyres, because it's going to be rather hot.
It is. Now, the reason they're all running with the headlights on is because it has been declared a wet race, and as part of the regulations they must run with their lights on as they work through then the second of the chicanes. Very, very slippery, and it's a narrow chicane here. And Duncan, a lot of the drivers will be taking what you in the trade call the wet line, and for those people watching home who don't quite understand what that means, can you explain exactly when you see the drivers doing something a little bit unusual through the corner, it's the wet line, and what does that represent?
Basically, the circuit majority run dry conditions, so a lot of rubber gets put down onto the track in a normal racing line. So what you do in the wet, try and come off of that line, conventional racing line, and try and avoid it, and always trying to get a good exit on.
Okay, well that's what they'll be looking to try and do as they weave around them behind the pace car. Such a huge field of cars. You just catch a glimpse there of the Monte Carlo BRC in the hands of Frederic Ledoux and Fulvio Labio, which is a newcomer to the championship this weekend. Very unusual car, that. Very, very spectacular car. Qualified in 23rd, and then completing the 24-car field is a very welcome returnee to the championship, and that is Beniamino Caccia, who is back in a Ferrari 458. Catch a glimpse there through the Ascari of the Manthey Racing Porsche of Nick Tandy. That is the bright green and yellow colour. That's the car second in the standings. Tandy and Holzer, well, they were hoping for rain coming to this weekend. They felt that would better favour the Porsche, but on the damp track, well, it just didn't quite come together for Nick Tandy. So the car's out of the Ascari along this back straight, getting ready for the Parabolica. And then the safety car will peel in. So it's the red AF Course Ferrari of Jimmy Bruni. That's the pole position car. Then the white Villilba Course Ferrari of Andrea Montermini. He completes the front row On the second row is the bright red Kessel Racing GTS car of Daniel Zampieri, and then the Chevrolet Corvette, the black car of Miguel Ramos. Very, very tentative, Montermini and Jimmy Bruni as they work around the Parabolica. Then they'll form up side by side. 70 minutes of racing about to get underway here at Monza in the International GT Open. It is going to be very, very exciting, I think, because tricky track conditions, very, very tight fight in the title standings, and Bruni and Montermini slow the field down almost to crawling pace as they mass towards the start line, waiting for those red lights to flash out and the race to get underway. The red lights are on, they're looming very large. We flash the green and away we go, and it's a very good getaway from Bruni. Montermini slots into second. Zampieri is going to try and jump him as the field en masse surge towards the first corner, but it's Jimmy Bruni in the air. Of course, Ferrari has got his nose ahead. Second place is Andrea Montermini. Third place is going to be Daniel Zampieri. Fourth place, Miguel Ramos. And then jumping to fifth is Lorenzo Bontempelli. Adam Christodoulou tries to move ahead of Ramon Narak as well, as somehow they all make it through the first chicane. And Nick Tandy tries to gain some ground in the Manthey Racing Porsche. He's in fact moved ahead of the Valois Aston Martin of Alvaro Barber as they sprint on towards that second chicane. And it is Jimmy Bruni, the former Minardi Formula 1 driver, who leads from another former Formula 1 driver, Montermini, who gets it wrong into the second chicane and goes across the track. He leapfrogs his way back on into the path of Daniel Zampieri. Zampieri, though, is going to be through past him like a shot. Everybody else is cleanly through. And Zampieri and Montermini go side by side into the Lesmos, and keeping his foot in his Montermini around the outside, he just holds on to second. Brave stuff in these early stages, Duncan.
Yeah, that was a prime example of the wet line there. You know, he stuck it around the outside and got the better drive out of it. And you'll see Zampieri in the slipstream here. Whether he's going to make a move at Ascari, it's a pretty difficult place to make a move there.
You have to say, though, if you looked in the dictionary for the word fear, you wouldn't find Daniel Zampieri associated with it. He is utterly committed to try to overtake where he can. Also a brilliant start from Adam Christodoulou in the bright orange Lapidus Racing McLaren. He's on the tail of Lorenzo Bontempelli in the blue Ombra Racing Ferrari, and all over their tail is Nick Tandy, and Tandy has had a super first lap. He's moved ahead of Ramon Narak already. He's also passed the Aston Martin of Alvaro Barber, as we already reported. That puts him currently fourth of the Super GT cars. He's about to try and gain that place. And Adam Christodoulou, the two British drivers, lights ablaze, arrive into the Parabolica, and around the outside goes Nick Tandy. So he moves up a position, or does he? As he does, Adam Christodoulou has to slot in behind him. Alvaro Barber also looks to gain ground as they all make it through the first lap of the race, and Jimmy Bruni leads it by 2.7 seconds already over Andrea Montermini. And this is what Jimmy Bruni, Duncan, is just known for. If you want a Ferrari GT car driven quickly, he is your man to turn to, and he's put together another stunning first lap.
That is a pretty impressive first lap. You know, 2.7 seconds in one lap. You know, he's doing his job very well there.
He certainly is, as the rest of the field all jig through then the opening chicane and accelerate around the long right-hander. There is Bruni, lights ablaze. Montermini still being pressurised by Kessel Racing's Daniel Zampieri. Then we've got Miguel Ramos, he's got Lorenzo Bontempelli and Nick Tandy right up on his tail. Tandy will be aiming to get past Bontempelli if he can on this lap. Iraj Alexander takes the chicane in the Swiss Racing Ferrari. Zampieri still pressurising Montermini, and Bontempelli's also got a run here on Miguel Ramos in the Corvette, but the Corvette, when the track goes straight, should be able to pull away from the Ferrari. But in these damp conditions, look, it really is a little bit more of a leveler. It comes down to the driver's commitment and actually confidence in their car.
Exactly, yes. Some people out there may not be that much running in the wet in these cars. You know, they've really got to analyse every little bit of the track and the conditions to get the most out of it. And as you can see, some are making the most of it.
So Alvaro Barber to the inside of Adam Christodoulou. So the Super GT, Aston Martin of Alvaro Barber, which slithers through Ascari, accelerating on the run then along towards the Parabolica, and Bruni has just pulled the pin and disappeared, but he needs to do that because the way that performance is equalised in the International GT Open is that all the drivers have a mandatory minimum pit stop time, which here at Monza is 70 seconds. Then the car that wins the senior race gets 15 seconds added to its pit stop time. The car that finishes second gets means is that Jimmy Bruni, when he hands over Frederic Hilaire, that car spent an extra 20 seconds in the pit, so he needs to make good his escape early on as Nick Tandy tries to challenge Lorenzo Bontempelli, whereas Nick Tandy, Michael Holmes, when they make their pit stop, they've only got an extra 5 seconds in the pits, and Andrea Montermini, well, he's got an extra 10 seconds. He's going to be there for 8 seconds. So even so, that means he's in the pits for 10 seconds less than Jimmy Bruni. So Bruni has to try and disappear. The Orlando Sport Porsche's busy engaging battle. It's Matteo Beretta just ahead of Archie Hamilton. These cars all running very, very closely together in these early stages. Bontempelli riding the curve, trying to see off Nick Tandy round the rack. Also looking to make a move, and Chris Dillon, the rack should go through here in the Porsche. Or does he? No. Christodoulou finding the grip around the outside on the wet line. He's able to hold his position there, and that is fine driving. And now the rack's being fed back in to challenger Philip Petrol, also Cesar Ramos there in number 53 car. They just give Christodoulou a little bit of momentary breathing space as they all accelerate on towards the Ascari. Zampieri, there he is in third position, still comfortably leading the GTS class from Lorenzo Bontempelli. Bontempelli, though, really enjoying these conditions. He's flinging the car around with abandon. But the moves to watch as they head towards Parabolica, as it was a super run out of Ascari for Alvaro Barber. Nick Tandy also trying to look to the inside of Lorenzo Bontempelli. And here comes the big Aston Martin of Alvaro Barber as they accelerate on towards Parabolica. And he changes of position. Yes, here we go. And it's Philip Petter to the inside of Ram on the rack. Through he goes. And I was talking to Philip after qualifying earlier on. He was saying they didn't have the balance for qualifying, but he thinks he's got a perfect setup for the race.
Well, it's obviously proving to be quite true there.
As Alvaro Barber gets the run on Nick Tandy, and they switch positions well before the first chicane. Tandy, though, is going to try and pressurise Barber into a mistake on the brakes. He's got the outside line in the Manthey Racing Porsche, and he holds his place. Really strong driving there from Nick Tandy in the Porsche. And this, as ever, Duncan, is the beauty of multi-mark GT racing, because these cars are all going to be stronger or weaker on certain sections of the circuit, and Tandy continues that momentum. He makes the longer way to move on Lorenzo Bontempelli. Bontempelli is now about to be bullied aside as well by Alvaro Barber in the Aston Martin. Is Lorenzo inclined to give it to him as they hit the brakes into the chicane? No, he's not, and Barber straight lines the chicane. He's going to have to pick his moment here to rejoin, which he does. About to maybe lose out to Klaus Hummel. It's not the widest section of the circuit, that's so Alvaro Barber tried to gain a place, has actually lost one. He's back into the clutches of Philip Petter, and it's still Nick Tandy who leads this group, fighting for 6th.
It's a really close battle, this. Because the conditions are pretty hard, you've got people making a few mistakes, and it just shows you that these boys are really earning their keep out there this weekend.
And it's a good opportunity here as well for Adam Christodoulou to move up to 2nd in the GTS class. He's in the orange McLaren, looking to the outside of the blue Ferrari. Bontempelli into Ascari, and he makes it stick. That's a brilliant move for Adam Christodoulou, as Bontempelli braked as late as he dared, and Alvaro Barber is sitting there watching this battle thinking, I need to get past them, but they're not making it at all easy for me. So it's still Jimmy Bruni in the AF Course Ferrari lead. 2nd place is that white Ferrari of Andrea Montermini. 3rd and leading GTS is Daniel Zampieri. It's Miguel Ramos in the Corvette in 4th. The fight, though, is the one for 5th, currently headed by Nick Tandy from Adam Christodoulou, Alvaro Barber, and then Lorenzo Bontempelli. As we look at the Manuel Mancini and Robert Lower down the field in the 2nd of the Corvettes. And now Tandy is being pressurised maybe by Christodoulou in the McLaren as they power along this start and finish straight. We're also going to see maybe a move coming from Alvaro Barber on Christodoulou. But before all the action kicked off last time round, I was about to say, multi-mark GT racing, you see cars that have got strengths and weaknesses around different sections of the circuit. We're seeing it very clearly down that run along the start and finish straight into the first chicane, because the Aston Martin's got the straight line speed, but Alvaro Barber is having to brake a good 10, 15 metres before his rivals.
Yeah, it really does highlight the difference in the cars. And also, you know, with the huge straights that you've got here at Monza, is that it not only evens up and shows the difference in the car, but it just makes the racing
sorry. Yeah, Nick Tandy's got it all wrong into the chicane. He spins the car around, and that's a very uncharacteristic error from Nick Tandy. He is going to rejoin, but right at the back of this group, and Tandy will be fuming with that. Let's have another look at it. Just snatched the rear brake. And from a driver's point of view, Duncan, that's so frustrating. You know you're going to spin. There's nothing you can do to save it, but it still took a long time to happen.
Yes, it was an odd one, that. I mean, you've got ABS and everything like that, and it's just spun round, and it's just very frustrating.
Well, the Super GT cars don't have ABS,
oh, he's
of
Super
course.
GT, of course.
So, yeah, that's going to be maybe what could have prompted it, as Alvaro Barber makes his move on Adam Christodoulou. So that is going to elevate the Aston Martin up into 5th, and now he can see the lead to the race stretched out along this long straight to the Parabolica. Andrea Monterni in 2nd, Daniel Zampieri 3rd, Miguel Ramos in 4th. Now, how quickly can Alvaro Barber get himself onto the tail of Miguel Ramos? Then everybody else in the race seems to be in 5th at the moment. It's a continuous stream of cars, and going very well as part of that is the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche of Matteo Beretta. He's got Cesar Ramos right up on his tail, and then Nick Tandy in the Manthey Racing Porsche. He's going to be down in something like 14th position at the end of this. That is 14th, so they flash through. We are 10 minutes into the race, and Philip Petter and Ramon the Rack are still going elbow to elbow here. Two of the most experienced drivers in the field, and these are the sort of conditions where all those years in the cockpit can really come to the fore. They've raced around Monza many times. They know where the grip is, they know what these cars do in these conditions, and they're certainly not afraid to go wheel to wheel. Into the second chicane then. Zampieri staying with Monterni. The battle to watch is surely going to be Alvaro Barber as he tries to close in on Miguel Ramos, but he's bringing Adam Christodoulou with him for company. And Adam, he's 2nd in the GTS classes. Tandy and Moncini almost tangle into the second chicane. This is the move for 13th, and Nick Tandy's got the inside line into the Lesmo. Can he make it stick? Moncini gives him a car's width, absolutely no more than that. And Nick Tandy, he wasn't on the wet line, around the outside. That's where the grip was, and so Moncini, Duncan, able to hold the place for the time being.
Yeah, you can really see that Nick there was struggling on the inside. The car's moving around, really on a nice power slide, but unfortunately not the quickest way around that corner, it seemed.
No, so he is going to try and pick his way back past fairly shortly. Likewise, Ramon the Rack has arguably got the pace through the corners to overhaul the Ferrari, Philip Petter, but he just can't quite draw alongside and make that overtaking manoeuvre. And the problem that Nick Tandy is going to have is that for all the corner speed of the Porsche, Emanuele Moncini's Corvette is very rapid in a straight line, and that could well frustrate him. I think the same effect is probably for Ramon the Rack, in that the Ferrari Philip Petter just a little bit quicker, maybe along some of the straights here. So there is Archie Hamilton, the 2nd of the Auto Orlando Sport Porsches, and the team we briefly mentioned earlier, up all night building a new car for Archie. He went off at Ascari yesterday on some coolant and did an awful lot of damage to the front of the car. And almost any other circuit, that would have been weekend over for Archie, but Auto Orlando are based just outside the gates of the Monza track, so the team were able to bring all the required parts over, and we're up all night rebuilding the car, and Archie's repaying them thus far with a fine drive.
Yeah, I spoke to Archie before the race, and he felt a little bit sorry for the boys because they've been up all night, really working hard, but obviously he was very thankful, and he's out there doing a sterling job.
To imagine he'll be picking up the bar tab for the next Auto Orlando Sport Night Out. Well, Archie Hamilton, we just saw Ramon the Rack making the move on Philip Petter. Again, he got more traction out of the first chicane, was able to squeeze in the Kessel Racing Ferrari. He stays ahead for the duration of one straight. He then straight lines the chicane, and he should rejoin behind Petter. He does. Lorenzo Bontempelli now goes wheel to wheel with Philip Petter, and he's going to try and squeeze through at Lesmo, which he does. And Lorenzo Bontempelli, oh, this is wonderful to watch. He is such an exuberant and effervescent character on and off the track, and he really is flinging that Ombra Racing Ferrari around. But the Kessel car of Philip Petter able to squeeze back past him. Petter, of course, running to Super GT specification, Bontempelli to GTS spec. And in the fight for 4th, Alvaro Barber is inexorably closing in onto the tail of Miguel Ramos. So that battle is coming together very nicely. We also saw a switch further back as Cesar Ramos was demoted to 13th as Emanuele Moncini in the Corvette climbed up to 12th. Still, Jimmy Bruni in the AF Course Ferrari, who leads. 2nd place is Andrea Monterni in the Villilba Course Ferrari. Daniel Zampieri in Kessel Racing's GTS Ferrari lies in third and leads his class very comfortably. Fourth is then the Corvette of Miguel Ramos. That, unfortunately, is a car a lap down. That is Freddie Kramer, who's got a huge number of supporters here to cheer him on this weekend. Under the Kessel Racing stable. And then in fifth is the Villois Racing Aston Martin of Alvaro Barber, who is the second of the black cars in that queue, and he is closing in on Miguel Ramos to the tune of actually only a couple of 4/10 of a second last time around, and he's bringing Adam Christodoulou with him in sixth, and Christodoulou second in the GTS class. Seventh is Philip Petter. Eighth is Lorenzo Bontempelli. He completes the GTS podium. Jimmy Bruni, though, leads the way with 15 minutes into it, and Bruni is doing, well, I was going to say, Duncan, exactly what he needs to do, but bearing in mind that he's going to be in the pit lane 20 seconds longer mid-race when he hands over to Federico Leon and some of his rivals, being 7.9 seconds, that's not enough at this stage.
No, it's not, but he is lapping about a second quicker than the second place man at the moment. So yeah, he just needs to keep whacking in those laps. You know, a man of his experience knows exactly what he needs to do, and I'm pretty sure he's well in control out there.
Well, Jimmy Bruni then hands over to the reigning FIA European GT3 champion Federico Leo. Andrea Montermini passes over to Juan Manuel Lopez, and Daniel Zampieri, it's Michael Dalla Stella who is his co-driver. So Montermini, like Jimmy Bruni, former Formula 1 driver for 40, Simtech and Pacific, one of the nicest people in the paddock as well. And that car has really come to Juan Manuel Lopez over the course of the season. The first few rounds of the year, Andrea kept saying, I just haven't quite got the balance just right. But I was talking to the team's press officer just before we came on air, and he was saying that Andrea and Juan Manuel felt very, very confident with their chances after qualifying. They're in second and actually staying very strongly in touch with Jimmy Bruni. Where's the passing move going to come from? Further back, Cesar Ramos is all over the tail of Archie Hamilton. Likewise, Emanuele Moncini tries to squeeze to the inside of Matteo Beretta, and he goes through. So Moncini in the Corvette gains a position. That's up into the top 10 for Emanuele Moncini. And I think the progress of the Corvette here, Duncan, is also telling us this track is getting a little bit drier as the Super GT cars work their way up through the fields.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time really before they really start stretching their legs that little bit more. You know, we can see just like looking out the window here, there's some dry patches appearing, so I think it's going to get pretty interesting.
Certainly is, as Moncini has a huge slide coming out of the first chicane, and Matteo Beretta is going to be through like a shot, isn't he? Or not, as Moncini then gets the power down a little bit more evenly and uses the straight line advantage of the Corvette to move ahead of the Porsche. So the Auto Orlando Sport Porsches are engaged in battle as Bontempelli tries to go around Freddie Kramer. He achieves that as, well, that's going to be a spike in blood pressure on Auto Orlando Sports pit wall as Archie Hamilton's all over the tail of Matteo Beretta. They're coming up to that Freddie Kramer. They've got Cesar Ramos right on their tail as well. Ramos, like so many of these drivers, making the transition into GT racing from single-seaters. And Ramos goes elbow to elbow with Archie Hamilton. He barges his way through, really. Side-on contact, but he gains the position. Hamilton slips down a place. He's now got Nick Tandy up on his tail as they fight over 13th. Fortunately, because that was side-on contact, I don't think there'll be any damage done to those cars. Philip Petter, in a race of ever-changing fortunes, is now back ahead of Ram on the rack. So it's Petter in 7th, the rack in 8th. As they jig through Ascari, they've got Lorenzo Bontempelli right on their tail. You don't know where to look, do you, in this, Duncan? It is such a keenly contested race. And I was going to say, these early stages, we're almost 20 minutes into it, and they're still racing as if it were the first lap.
They really are. They're going at it hammer and tongs, but it's great to watch. You know, there's lots of overtaking all the time. You know, the track's evolving lap by lap, so it really is, you know, not easy in there. You know, people are always making mistakes out there, and just got to keep it on the black stuff. And I think that's hard enough at the moment. As you see, Zampieri really sliding it around.
As does Andrea Montermini. Montermini rides the curves. Now, is that going to give an opening maybe to Daniel Zampieri to try and get up ahead of him? Emanuele Moncini, meanwhile, gives consideration trying to move ahead of Lorenzo Bontempelli. He can't quite do that. Likewise, Cesar Ramos and Matteo Beretta are nose to tail through that first chicane. Nick Tandy has been able to move ahead of Archie Hamilton as well. So Tandy's recovery continues after that spin. So still, we focus on the fight for 7th, and this is the most aggressive I think we've seen Ram on the rack this year. He really is hassling Philip Petra every opportunity. Emanuele Moncini very deep on the brakes, into the chicane, in the Corvette, in pursuit of Lorenzo Bontempelli, who rides over the curbs, and Moncini is going to try and go through here at Lesmo. Again though, Bontempelli's got the outside line, that's where the grip is in the damp, but Moncini slithers to the inside. It's then a drag race to the second of the Lesmos, which is won by Bontempelli. He moves across the bows of Moncini's into the pit lane. We have got Bob Herbert in the Ferrari 458. Team going to work on the car. Also got Turi, or at least going fairly slowly. Unfortunately, Frederic Ladieu in the Monte Carlo BRC car. I think maybe he's just backing off to let this leading scrap go through. Now the fight that's coming together is arguably for 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th, because Miguel Ramos has been caught by Alvaro Barber, to the effect of Ramos in the Corvette just doing his personal best lap of the race, as he then closes up on Daniel Zampieri, who is still keeping on trail with Montermini. Very honest, so over the line they come, and there is Montermini, the white Ferrari. He runs in 2nd. 3rd is this man, Daniel Zampieri in the Kessel Racing Ferrari. 4th is the Corvette of Miguel Ramos. 5th is Alvaro Barber in the Villois Racing Aston Martin. And 6th, 2nd in the GTS class, which is led by Zampieri, is Adam Christodoulou. Zampieri, well, he's been doing this all year. He's really been in fine form, and he certainly, looking to the 2013 season, is going to be one of the most sought-after signatures.
He's been racing a few things this year, and he's done a really good job in everything. So yeah, he's going to be a bit of hot property next season.
He's also the most unlikely looking racing driver. He's rarely seen outside of his tracksuit bottoms, but when it comes to performing in the car, he is just absolutely sublime, particularly in these damp conditions. And to run with drivers of the calibre of Jimmy Bruni and Andrea Montermini really takes some doing. Bruni's advantage, by the way, is 10.7 seconds. And then Montermini just fractionally ahead of Zampieri. And they have got Ramos and Barber looming very large on their tail as well. And also Adam Christodoulou, so 2nd to 6th, all closing up on each other as they head towards Scar. And as these gaps come down, the challenge is going to be, where do you overtake? Because the Super GT cars have got straight line speed advantage, but the ABS brakes of the GTS cars, as long as the track stays damp and stays tricky, may just give the drivers a little bit more confidence in the braking zones.
Exactly. You know, it's drying up. You know, there's not much. You don't need much confidence just to hit that ABS pedal as hard as you can. Yeah, it's gonna really widen up soon, I think.
So we are already 23 minutes into this race, as around the Parabolica goes Miguel Ramos, sliding the tail of the Aston Martin is Alvaro Barber. If nothing else, he's enjoying himself here as he closes up on Ramos. Ramos, though, losing 0.3 of a second to Daniel Zampieri on that last lap, and Zampieri closed in, as you can see, substantially on Andrea Montermini. So we are beginning to get these battles coming together. Particularly, Zampieri's got a super on Montermini coming out of the chicane. We just got away from that to go back to the fight between Philip Petter, Ram on the rack, and Emanuele Moncini. So Moncini in the Corvette, what a stint he's putting together. As the car has come to him, he has been flying, and he's now onto the tail of the rack. He'll be looking to try and get through by the time they get to the second chicane. The rack, likewise, is looking to make that passing manoeuvre on Philip Petter, and the rack has got the inside line through the right hand, and then they head towards the chicane, and Petter, there's the experience for you, plants the car squarely in the middle of the road. No way through there for Ram on the rack. Emanuele Moncini right on the tail of the rack though, as Petter runs wide, and that's the rack's opportunity. He pounces, so does Moncini, and in the blink of an eye, Philip Petter loses 2 positions. Now Moncini's all over the tail of the Frenchman. Ram on the rack as they came out of Lesmo. It was almost as if they were one car. I just wonder if Petter's got a problem there, actually, because he seems to be slowing and weaving just a little bit. Lorenzo Bontempelli. You're right, there's leaps of flame coming out from underneath the car. It's a good spot, Duncan. So Philip Petter is going to be, I would hope, a fairly casualty. Do we see it there? It
might just almost looks in the brakes.
Yeah, it could well be. There's certainly smoke coming out from the rear of the car now. There's a fire in the engine bay, and that car is about to go up in smoke in a big way. And I'm sure the team, when they saw that on the TV monitors, will be saying to Philip, pull over as quickly as possible. I think he's going to try and bring the car round to the pits, but I'm not sure it's going to last that long. So he brakes into the parabolica, and Philip Petter, well, he must be aware in the cockpit that it's getting very, very warm, but he's showing his experience. He's going to bring the car around. I'm sure he will bring it into the pit lane this time around, and the pit marshals will be ready waiting for him. As into the pit lane as well, we have got one of the slower cars right in front of him, Philip Petter. He can't even disguise his impatience. He's desperate to just get that run along the pit lane, and I think he's decided, no, I'm going to have to overtake. This car isn't going any further. I need to pull it into my pit box where they can put out the fire. So frustration for Philip Petter, and very, very unusual to see a fire like that in those Ferraris, Duncan. They're normally extremely reliable.
Yeah, really odd how it would happen out on the circuit as well. I mean, we see incidents in the pit lane quite often. Unfortunately, I've had a few incidents myself like that, and it's really scary, but something out on track.
Oh, sorry, Alvaro Barber goes off in the Aston Martin again. He's already lost a place to Adam Christodoulou, and Barber slithers wide, and with an eye towards the championship, this is really potentially very good for Jimmy Bruni, as we have another look at that fire for Philip Petter. And that's such a shame. You never like to see these cars retiring from the race. I only hope that there's not too much damage done to the internals of that car, but it doesn't look particularly good, as Alexander and Stefano Bizzarri go shoulder to shoulder into one of the chicanes. Archie Hamilton also joins them, and there is Alvaro Barber just understeering out wide, and he was trying to follow the line of Adam Christodoulou, but the car just wouldn't quite turn in.
Yeah, it's getting to that stage now where these wets are getting cooked and they're melting, so the car's moving around on the tyre. It's like having marbles on the surface of the tyre, and it's just really nasty to drive. It's like you're on eggshells all the time. You have to be really careful, and it's just caught him out there through Lesmo.
In other news, Emanuele Moncini has moved up to 7th, ahead of Ram on the rack. Still Jimmy Bruni, who leads by almost 13 seconds from Andrea Monterni. Then it's Daniel Zampieri, who sits in 3rd, Miguel Ramos in 4th, Alan Christodoulou is 5th, Alvaro Barber is 6th, and then 7th place is Emanuele Moncini. As across the chicane goes Miguel Ramos, and these drivers, I think it's probably two things, isn't it, Duncan? Firstly, it's the track drying out slightly, they're a bit more confident. Secondly, as you said, they're on used tyres, which means maybe they think they've got more grip available to them than there actually is.
Yeah, it's an odd one, and the track's drying out, so you think you've got more grip. But like I said, the tyres are wearing out and really starting to melt, so the car's just going to be moving around an awful lot. And to the keen eye, you saw Adam in the McLaren back at the chicane had a massive slide and caught it, and that's what happens. The car just moves around a lot. You see the car just moving, it's skating around, and some cars can cope with it better than others.
And the other bad news, of course, now is that we've got oil being reported out on the track as well from Philip Petter's car. The pit window is open, so the driver changes can start. So this race is once more going to be turned to its head, particularly as Jimmy Bruni has not pulled out 20 seconds over a lot of his rivals. It's going to be very, very tight through the pit window as Adam Christodoulou gains the place on Miguel Ramos as they head into Ascari, and Christodoulou is just flying in the McLaren. He's going supremely well. Cesar Ramos, who's been in the pits, has a lot to do as Wim Almeida pits in, and then Enrique Bonaldi, the former Formula 1 driver for the Arrows team, is about to take over. Cesar Ramos sets about unlapping himself on Miguel Ramos. Ramos won't be overly amused by that. But Ramos, that Corvette, would appear to have used its tyres pretty quickly, and Ramos decides to peel into the pits, and that is to hand over to Raffaele Gianmaria. So Gianmaria it is who will take over from Miguel Ramos, who's really one of the first of the front runners to make that mandatory pit stop. I suspect, though, Adam Christodoulou, who runs second in the GTS class, will stay out as late in the race as he possibly can. He hands over to Klaus Hummel, class is a quick drive, but he's not really quite the same pace as Adam Christodoulou. So Adam, I suspect, will stay out there quite late. But Christodoulou, as a result of all of that, is closing in on Daniel Zampieri. He's only 3.4 seconds back from Daniel, as it's all changed Auto Orlando Porsche, and that is going to be Marco Mappelli, who takes over from Archie Hamilton. So Archie's work for today is done. A very rapid Marco Mappelli then is buckled into the cockpit of the Porsche as they fight for the GCS Championship. That's really what they are aiming for. Unfortunately, not having done all the rounds, Adam Christodoulou is not in the championship fight, but he will certainly be looking to try and bring that McLaren home at the very least today on the podium. I don't know whether we missed a mistake from Zampieri off camera, Doug, because he's dropped a couple of seconds back from Andrea Montermini and would appear to be being caught again by Adam Christodoulou over the course of this lap, although it could also be that Zampieri has maybe worked through those tyres a little bit more quickly than some of his rivals.
Yeah, you know, Daniel was pushing very hard for those first stint there, and Adam, you know, was maybe being a little bit smoother looking after it, you know, but the McLaren seems to be handling these conditions very well, and he's absolutely flying at the moment. So, see what happens.
He really is. That McLaren is just a very, very nicely balanced all-round package as a GT car. You know, because you race one, and it's just relishing these very tricky conditions for the drivers, because we've certainly got the beginnings of a dry line forming here. However, we've got also some very dark clouds beginning to form over the circuit. So the story of this race in terms of the weather is not yet done. We're just a few moments away from hitting half-race distance as Zampieri gets the first chicane all wrong, runs a little bit wide. We'll find out what happens in a moment as we turn our attention back to the race leader, Jimmy Bruni, and Bruni's advantage over Andrea Montermini climbed by 1.3 seconds on that last lap. His lead is now nearly 15 seconds, and Bruni, well, you were saying earlier on, Duncan, that you thought with his experience he had everything in hand. I think that's proving to be exactly the case. Now he's coming towards the latter stage of his stint. He's really pushing and opening up that lead.
It is, you know, it's a pleasure to see. He didn't go too mad. He's probably looking after the tyres as best he can as well. And now, you know, you've got the teams thinking about whether to leave them out a little bit longer, maybe to the last possible minute. If it's going to dry up, then, you know, they may even consider slicks. You know, that they've changed. The drivers here are changing their lines. It's almost a dry line now. You know, so the wet line that we were talking about at the beginning, they're kind of forgetting that it's down to a normal racing line. So it's not long until they're going to be on slicks if it doesn't rain again.
And certainly some of these more powerful cars as well, a couple of tentative laps on slicks, as opposed to trying to nurse some very second-hand wet tyres to the checkered flag, might be a good call for them. Jimmy Bruni about to complete then the 16th lap of the race. There is his co-driver, Federico Leo, poised and ready on the pit wall. He's going to have to wait at least another lap before Bruni passes over the keys of that AF Course Ferrari to him. Daniel Zampieri, there he is after that error, and he's got Christodoulou on his tail. The pair of them coming onto the tail of Marco Mappelli. Mappelli is essentially a lap down here, so they're not racing for position, but Christodoulou's going to have the perfect opportunity to try and move into the lead of the GTS class as they come along the start and finish straight here. But it's the Orlando Sport Porsche which is the fastest of the three of them, and Mappelli weaving around, getting heat into the tyres. Might suggest he's on slicks. Christodoulou looks to the outside of Zampieri. This is going to be very, very tight on the brakes. And Christodoulou goes through, takes the lead of the class, and then he tags Mappelli. It's a traffic jam through the first chicane. They're all looking for room here. And Mappelli, well, there was nothing he could do. He can't make himself invisible. And Christodoulou carried so much speed through, and he's going to go around Mappelli now through the Curva Grande. At least I hope he does, as they then head towards the second chicane. But that Porsche is very rapid in the straight line. Christodoulou now puts the lap on Mappelli as they hit the brakes into the second chicane. Misses his braking point, keeps it within the track margins. Mappelli has another bite at him. So does Daniel Zampieri. On towards the Lesmo they come. Mappelli is through. Zampieri is through, but Christodoulou's got the outside line and he's got the grip. He then follows in behind Zampieri. The pair of them, let's not forget, they're racing for class lead here and third in the race overall. And it swings back to Daniel Zampieri. And poor Marco Mappelli doesn't know what to do. He's trying to race at his own pace which is actually a little bit quicker than the two cars just behind him, was squabbling that third place and class lead. In the meantime, running in fifth is Alvaro Barber. He's got Emanuele Moncini up on his tail. Christodoulou looking every which way to pass Zampieri. Zampieri, though, driving a wide Ferrari into Ascari. Barber on Moncini, closing in onto their tail. Then we've got Ram on the rack, who's next up in seventh. So out of Ascari then comes the fight for third. Zampieri, so with all the cars in this race have been declared wet, lights ablaze. Adam Christodoulou, the bright orange Lapidus Racing McLaren, up onto his tail. And Christodoulou, the last two laps, he's just eaten chunks of time out of Zampieri. Zampieri slides the tail of the Ferrari through the Parabolica, accelerates then on to complete his 17th lap. Christodoulou right on his wheel tracks. Now, will Adam be able to make that pass again into turn one? That's what he's going to attempt to try and do. Zampieri certainly thinks he is, because he moves the inside of the circuit already. Then realises that Christodoulou isn't quite close enough. Now it comes down to who's got their braking point right, and it wasn't Zampieri, but he keeps him within the track boundaries. He stops the car on the apex. No way through for Adam Christodoulou. Brilliant driving, Doug, between the pair of them.
It's incredible. The last few laps have really been quite interesting, because Adam had a stonking run on the lap before down into the chicane. Really played it very well. Was unlucky just to get it a little bit wrong down at the chicane the lap before. But I've been looking at Mapelli, and I just wonder whether he's got slicks on, because he's weaving around the straight to get some temperature into it. And he's pulled away at quite a significant amount. So I wonder whether they've made the call already.
We've got a change
Let's see what goes on here
as well. Yeah, unfortunately, that's the Manto Racing Porsche. It's Marco Holzer who takes over from Nick Tandy. They've been very intrigued to see if they were putting slicks onto that car. Yeah, but Mapelli, I reckon, could well be on slicks, because on any given day, you'd expect that Zampieri and Mapelli would be even in pace, if not Zampieri being a little bit quicker. And so the fact that Mapelli is pulling away slightly, partly that's the characteristics of the Porsche around this MONZA circuit. So it does point maybe to slick tyres on the Auto Orlando Sport machine. Christodoulou and Zampieri, differing angles of attack through Ascari. And we've seen a change. Moncini's moved ahead of Alvaro Barber. So the Villeroy's Racing, Aston Martin really struggling. Again, that could well be a grip thing, and used tyres. Zampieri, the inside line towards Parabolica. He then moves back across the middle of the road. And is Christodoulou going to try around the outside here? No, he gives it some thought. Alexander Tauknitsa about to go a lap down as we have another look through turn one. No contact. Wow, that is judgment.
I don't know about that. I think there may have been a little bit of a love tap just as they went through the middle of it.
Yeah. Hello, Marco, I'm here. Thanks, Adam. Right, now we've got emerging onto the track as well, Marcello Puglisi in the second Auto Orlando Sport Porsche, as Christodoulou threads the needle, gains the place, comes right up onto the tail of Massimo Mantovani, goes around Mantovani, and that's really fair driving from Mantovani. So the McLaren and the Ferrari continuing their fight for third position. The race still being led by Jimmy Bruni. He's not pitted in, nor has Andrea Montermini. And then we have got Christodoulou charging, and Daniel Zampieri. Now, in terms of additional time in the pits, Zampieri's carrying almost the maximum. He has got an additional 25 seconds that he will have to spend in the pit lane. So that is going to give Michael Dallastella an awful lot of work to do later on in the race. And then again, it's an extra 20 seconds for Alan Christodoulou and Klaus Hummels. So they're going to have to push. So really, these drivers, those running at the front of the field, are those that have got the most additional time spent in the pits, which is going to give us a very interesting dynamic when the pit window closes. And then we get a view as to the gaps that need to be chased down. The cars that have pitted in, it's Patrick Pilet, who is probably the foremost of those. He emerges from the pit lane now in the number 16 IMSA Performance Macmillan Porsche, as over the line to complete his 19th lap goes Jimmy Bruni. Running behind him on the road, but actually a lap down, is Rafael Gianmaria in the Chevrolet Corvette. Gianmaria and Miguel Ramos, winners in this 70-minute race, last time out at Hungary. Gianmaria, though, struggling to get the car stopped just in time for the turn one chicane, and this race flying by, just 30 minutes left on the clock. Gian Maria has done his personal best lap of the race, 2:05. Federico Leo and the AF Course team all ready, so that would point towards Jimmy Bruni coming in at the end of this lap, and Bruni is coming up onto tail Patrick Pilet as well, as Pilet gets up to pace. Will Patrick move aside to let Jimmy Bruni through? Probably not, given the rivalry between Ferrari and Porsche. So around the Lesmo they come. And again, Pilet, the way he's weaving around Duncan, that would suggest that he may have gone for slicks too.
I think they've all probably seen Mapelli gone out there and straight away going well, and I think they've all done it. Yeah, weaving around like that, you wouldn't do that with wet, so.
And Rafael Gian Maria fancies unlapping himself here in the Corvette. He pulls alongside Jimmy Bruni, and is Bruni going to let him have it into Ascari? No, he's not. And again, that was the first of the cars to make its mandatory pit stop, but Jimmy and Ramos would fancy their chances of claiming victory here, because a lap time at the moment is 2 minutes 120 seconds. Now the mandatory minimum pit stop time for Federico Leo and Jimmy Bruni is 90 seconds, so all things being equal, they should come out of the pits ahead of this battle. That's relying on an absolutely metronomic pit stop from AF Course, although very rarely isn't. So around Parabolica and into the pit lane goes Jimmy Bruni. Federico Leo is waving to him there in the pit lane, you can see, just making sure that Jimmy Bruni is able to find his marks. He gets down to the 60-kilometre mandatory pit lane speed limit. Rolls along to a halt. Now, will we see whether it's slick tyres? It is slick tyres that are going to go on to that Ferrari. So Bruni hops out. Leo clambers in. Maybe a few words of advice being passed over by Jimmy Bruni as he straps Federico Leo to the cockpit of the AF Course Ferrari. Also in on this lap has been Juan Manuel Lopez, well, Andrea Montermini to take over from Juan Manuel Lopez, and also Daniel Zampieri and Alan Christou also both in. In the case of Zampieri, turned over to Michael Dallastella in the number 44. Ferrari as a spin for Alexander Taukanitsa at turn 1. He's going to have to be careful getting the power back down on that, as have we seen the Valois Aston Martin? And yes, we have. It's Matteo Malicelli who has got Marco Holzer right up on his tail, and Holzer, that's a pass for position, and he goes through as one of the Auto Orlando Sport Porsches has ripped away its front spoiler, and I've got a horrible feeling that that is Marco Mapelli who's picked up the damage. Here is why. Is it quite? So no, that's just the spin from Alexander Taukanitsa, who's the other Auto Orlando Porsche that picked up the damage. Try and find out what caused that fairly shortly. Certainly Marco Mapelli maybe just pushing a little bit too hard as the pit window comes to a close. It's really going to be the end of the next time around, Duncan, when we get an indication of the orders, but Federico Leo has come out. I think he's come out with a fairly significant advantage here.
Yeah, I think the next thing for him to do is to get those slicks up to temperature as quickly as possible, just get his head down.
That's what he's going to have to do. And Leo, who was immensely frustrated at the Hungaroring when he spent lap after lap up behind Miguel Ramos and just couldn't find a way past him, so he is going to want to retaliate from that. And he accelerates through the Curva Grande onto the second of the chicanes. End of this lap, though, we'll find what his exact advantage over Juan Manuel Lopez is, and then whether or not it's on for Lopez. It's a big slide, and that bears out exactly your point, Duncan. You've got to be careful on the damp track on slick tyres.
You do, you know, the only thing that's going to get temperature to those tyres, you've got to be getting as much temperature through the brakes, getting heat, and then you can push. If you push too early and you lose out too much, see what's happening right now.
And he's got Stefano Gattuso, last year's GTS champion, on his tail. Gattuso a lap down, but I think he's having a little bit of sport here with Federico Leo. He's flashing his lights, saying, come on, let me through, unlap myself, and Leo, very wisely, I think, gives him the room. Now, where are the rest of the front runners? So it's Patrick Pilet who is in second, it's Rafael Gian Maria in third, and then Juan Manuel Lopez is in fourth. We'll get that officially confirmed at the end of this lap, but that is how that order has shaken itself out. So this could be on here, because there is the race leader, Federico Leo, just behind the Black Ferrari of Stefano Gattuso. Patrick Pilet is the next man in the queue, still trying to heat those tyres as here's Ramon Larac, look for their first win of the year. And then we've got Rafael Gianmaria and Juan Manuel Lopez. We've got 25.5 minutes remaining, and we could be in for another grandstand finish in the International GT Open during the 2012 season. Juan Manuel Lopez also wiggles around to get those tyres up to temperature, but this, Duncan, is the opening for Gianmaria and Pilet. They had the earlier pit stops, they've got the heat in their tyres, and they're only 3.6 seconds back from Federico Leo.
Yeah, I think Leo's going to really have to get it together quite quickly. They've got their bit between the teeth right now. And, you know, it's going to be a close one. And a mistake in the first chicane. So easy to do when the tyres, you know, as soon as you go offline, you've only got to just put your outside wheels offline by an inch, and then you've got a passenger for the rest of the corner.
The other challenge for the drivers here is that the track is lined very closely with grass, and that means if they put a wheel off onto the grass, they will be pirouetting. As we've got the battle for the lead absolutely joined now, and Leo is going to have to work very hard here to keep Pilet behind him, but he can't do it, and Patrick Pilet moves in to lead the race as they power towards the Lesno. So it's Patrick Pilet then who leads it, the driver who's 6th in the championship standings at the moment, and Leo is going to go down to 3rd very, very shortly, because he's got Rafael Gianmaria right up on his tail as well. So Gianmaria pushing very, very hard to try and make that overtaking manoeuvre on Leo. The pair of them running nose to tail, accelerating on towards Scari, and Gianmaria jigs the inside line. He's going to fancy his chances on the brakes here versus Federico Leo, and through he goes into 2nd. Very nicely judged move from Gianmaria, vastly experienced competitor, of course, Rafael Gianmaria. So now what can he do about Patrick Pilet? So there is the race leader, Sports Magnum Porsche of Pilet, and that is how he did it. Colder tyres from Leo. He didn't have the confidence to get his right foot down. Pilet shot through, and then Leo, just a couple of corners later, pushed into 3rd by Rafael Gianmaria. So now, though, the battle is between the Porsche and the Corvette, and whether or not Rafael Gianmaria can get himself onto terms with Patrick Pilet. Now, this is where the management of those controlled Dunlop tyres, Duncan, becomes absolutely key. Monza is an abrasive circuit. We know that the Porsche, because it's got such good traction, generally can get through those tyres a little bit more quickly than some of its rivals, as straight lining the chicane.
Yeah, Gianmaria just outbraked himself in the chicane there. He's lost a load of time.
So Rafael Gianmaria, well, he's pushing very, very hard. I was about to say that the Corvette is a little bit more generous in its tyres, but Gianmaria proved the negative point of the Corvette, which was it's very, very quick in a straight line, and it's heavy, and it's a portable earthquake. It does take some stopping.
Yeah, it's a bit of a beast, that one, isn't it? You know, it's all very well when it's all going in the right direction, and you know, you've got that thing thundering down the straight. To get it through the corners isn't maybe quite as nimble as a Porsche or a Ferrari.
Yes, and that is what Rafael Gianmaria discovered then. So Patrick Pilet pushes on, 20 minutes remaining. Some traffic up ahead of them, including a twitching Stefano Gattuso. The first car, though, is going to be Fulvio Valabio. Fulvio Valabio, who's probably got one of the most diverse careers of any of the drivers in the field. He raced in Formula 2 back in the 1980s, also raced in IndyCar in the 1980s, and Pilet launches the car onto 2 wheels through Ascari, trying to lap Valabio. That was one of the shots of the season. How he kept that car in one piece, I don't know. He still tries to put heat into those slick tyres, and Patrick Pilet knows that Gianmaria is coming, and the gap from 1st to 2nd has come down considerably as Gianmaria closes on him. Here we see it again, up over the curbs. Commitment all over that car of Patrick Pilet. Let's have another look at it.
3 wheels there, 3 wheels.
Absolutely spectacular, wasn't it? Something you'd expect more from touring car racing, not GT cars, but he needs to do it because Rafael Gianmaria, despite that mistake into this chicane a lap ago, was 3/10 faster on that last lap. The gap between them is just 2.3 seconds. Now, can Gianmaria do it to chase down Patrick Pilet? Pilet, though, as I said, looking for his first victory of the season. He was very much in the championship hunt before we came to Brands Hatch, when it all went very wrong, when they went off on the installation lap, and thereafter that car has never really been in the hunt for victories. But Pilet has seized the opportunity today. He and Ram on the rack. Will they come through and claim victory, or will it be the second win in 2 rounds for Rafael Gianmaria and Miguel Ramos? Third place then is Federico Leo. There he is. And again, you just wonder, Duncan, once he gets the confidence in that car, whether he could start closing on the leading scrap. At the moment, he's a couple of seconds on that back, but it's going to take him 2 or 3 laps to get the heat to those tyres. When he does, it'll be interesting to see how the of course Ferrari's pace compares to that of the race leaders.
Oh, well, we've seen the cars fast. You know, it's quite capable, but he's locked up the front going into the Ferrari there, but hasn't quite got the confidence to push as hard as the other guys. He's just dropping back that little bit too far now, I'd say. I mean, that's almost the whole straight.
In the meantime, we've got the team manager from car 21. That's the sister of course car of Federico Leo, Enrique Minoldi, who has been summoned to race control. Find out for what momentarily, as we have a little bit of Oda enthusiasm there for Andrea Rizzoli as he makes the move on Alan Kalari. The pair of them disputing 11th position, so another lap completed, and to within about 1,000th of a second, Patrick Pilet and Rafael Gianmaria set identical times. Now Pilet, though, is trying to lap Massimo Mantovani, which he's able to do, but where you catch the traffic, Duncan, is going to be crucial, because there's only that one line, particularly through the first 2 chicanes. You catch a slower car there, you could lose in excess of a second.
Yeah, it's quite possible. It's, you know, you're such high speed sections and then down to slow speed that if you just catch them at the wrong point and you've got someone that's going a fair bit slower than you, you're going to lose a huge amount of time. So it is a bit of luck, really, but these guys are experienced. I'm sure they'll get around it.
Well, this is the drive we've been looking for from Patrick Pilet all year in terms of just sheer exuberance and pace. He runs out over the rumble strip. He's still trying to close on Stefano Gattuso. Gattuso having a huge amount of fun. Gianmaria, well, his charge may have just been temporarily stymied, I wonder, as he attempts to close on Patrick Pilet, because Pilet has pulled out over the course of this lap by a couple of tenths of a second, so Gianmaria trying very, very hard in the Corvette. Can't do an awful lot. There is Marco Mappelli, who, despite that damage, actually leads the GTS class, and that will be to his and Arch Hamilton's delight, because they are pushing to win the GTS Championship, and that will do them well. Look at this, Michael Dalla Stella, who lies second in the GTS class, and Marcello Puglisi, the sister of Orlando Sport Porsche, who is third. Mappelli is closing in on Diederik Schütthoff there in the Corvette, so they fight over 6th and 7th. In 5th, it's the Manthey Racing Porsche and Marco Holzer. In 4th is Juan Manuel Lopez. In 3rd, then Federico Leo. Now, the battle that's really coming together here is the one for 4th and 5th, because Lopez is being caught all the while by Holzer, but that is a problem for Mappelli. The bodywork has evidently snapped, he's rubbing against the tyre. And how long will Mappelli be able to keep driving like that? Because sometimes, Duncan, that could lead to the bodywork rubbing itself out. Other times, it can lead to a puncture.
Yeah, that's not looking good, unfortunately. It's such a shame, absolutely flying up until then. You know, to get himself into the lead, and I don't know what he's done, whether he's tagged someone or hit the chicane, but yeah, that's not good. That's not going to be able to last like that, unfortunately.
Well, he was riding the chicane very hard at Ascari last time, and I just wonder if he's flicked something. That said, some bodywork has flown off, so next acceleration we'll see if that smoke reappears. That may have just done the trick for Pelly, because that can be the case. When you've got that rubbing, you leave the puncture, or the bodywork will snap off. No, the bodywork hasn't snapped off. He's still got smoke as the bodywork rubs up against that front right tyre. It's not diminishing his pace at all, is it? As he continues to pursue Diederik Schütthoff into the 2nd chicane.
I just wonder whether it can kind of wear away the bodywork, and then he'll be all right. But it's done a lot of damage, I'd say, to that tyre so far.
I just wonder whether Auto Orlando Sport have got another front spoiler as well back in the garage, because they're on on to their second of the weekend. We've got a drive-through penalty for Enrique Bonaldi, and that is for not obeying the handicap time. As we take a look at Dario Cirati, very welcome newcomer to the championship this weekend, in the car that he is sharing with Beniamino Caccia, as the race leader Patrick Billet has just put a lap on him into the final 15.5 minutes of the race. 26 laps completed by Billet. Driving on through the murk here. It's only 4:30 local time here at Monza, although you wouldn't quite believe it, would you, with the lights on and a granite grey sky over the track. Now that, if Mapelli were to have to pit, which feels inevitable, although he has left a lot of his car now along the run towards the Parabolicas. There's some of the offending bodywork, and Michael Dalla Stella nonetheless is closing up onto the tail of Marco Mapelli, so Dalla Stella and Daniel Zampieri could come through and claim GTS honours here, because Mapelli, for the time being, is determined to continue, and almost in James Bond style, he's setting up a smokescreen for his rivals, but that is not sustainable, and that feels, or looks, an awful lot like a tyre that's about to let go, because the smoke seems to worsen each time he comes around. There's more bodywork peeling off the car. This is when some of it let go last time around, but what it seems to me, Duncan, is it's probably the front wing on the car that's rubbing, because he's lost now the front spoiler, and we've still got that smoke as Klaus Hummel runs over the bodywork. We could also be looking at a safety car here with all of that debris that's on the track.
Yeah, it's quite odd to see a car continuously running like that and not have the mechanical flag. You know, he's chucked stuff all around the track. C-Class has picked up something there, potentially dangerous. It's a shame for them, but if something happens, it could really be quite dangerous. So I'm surprised we haven't seen that. Maybe we will shortly.
And a spin for Alan Kalari into the turn 1 chicane, and in sympathy, the Mercedes goes around as well. So pity for the pair of them. It was Alessandro Garofano, it was, in the Mercedes, who shared in the pirouette. So the pair of them rejoin after that quick spin. It shows, though, just how treacherous it is for these drivers, particularly if they put a wheel slightly off the racing line. So there is Alan Kalari into the corner backwards. And from a driver's point of view, Duncan, it's quite unsettling, actually, with those rumble strips, to come across those backwards. You don't know quite how the car's going to be launched.
No, I can imagine that was a bit of a surprise. Thankfully, I haven't experienced that, but it would, yeah, it would maybe feel like you're on a bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah. Of course, doing you a great disservice, because you've never known you had an incident in your career, at least not one that was your fault. As with all racing drivers.
Never.
Billet is ruthless through the traffic. He scythed past Alan Kalari then. And up on his tail is, I think that's Enrique Bonaldi, who's just emerged from his drive-through penalty. Bonaldi, a very, very quick driver, so he's going to try and stay in touch with Patrick Billet. This is certainly what Patrick Billet would not want to have, is a car that's a lap down due to various circumstances, drive-through penalty. Slightly slower gentleman driver doing the first stint, but staying right in his wheel tracks, particularly with those headlights on, fully ablaze.
It could potentially put him off, but you know, he's plenty of experience. Seems like he's well and truly in the groove, and just keeps whacking in the laps. You know, the lap time there, by far the quickest car on track. Just got to keep doing what he's doing.
At the moment, he's doing everything as he needs to. He runs across the line, completes the 28th lap of the race. He has also, on the preceding lap, set the fastest lap of the race, so Patrick Billet's advantage over Raffaele Giambria had been growing. It came down on that last lap. It's 4.6 seconds, which is a manageable advantage for a driver of Billet's calibre. Like Marco Holzer in the Manthey Racing Porsche, he's a Porsche Works driver, and this is the sort of performance that from a perspective of Porsche, this is the sort of performance you need your drivers to pull out. Billet was in with a sniff of taking the victory, and suddenly he's just turned ruthless. He's carving through the traffic, he's riding the curbs, he is pushing every ounce of speed out of that car, and it is really working. Here and Ram on the rack are looking well set maybe, to claim victory. In the meantime, Marco Mappelli soldiers on in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche. He still leads the GTS class despite the damage to that car as they put a lap on Fulvio Palabio. Now that is the battle I was talking about a little bit earlier on. Here is Marco Holzer, who runs in fourth. He's moved ahead of Juan Manuel Lopez, and Holzer could get third here, and this is absolutely crucial, this fight for the championship, because leading the championship by 1 point is the car of Federico Leo, who is just up the road ahead of Marco Holzer. He flashes his headlights, and so Holzer and Nick Tandy could yet be leading the championship at the checker flag of this race. And Holzer is closing in hand over fist on Federico Leo, who was 4 seconds quicker last time around. He's got Alessandro Garofano to circumnavigate first of all in the Mercedes, but Holzer is in a mood here, so is Leo. He flashes his headlights maybe a little bit prematurely to Alan Kalari, but Marco Holzer and Federico Leo, these two drivers are fighting for the lead of the championship, and it's the Manthey Racing Porsche man. Marco Holzer, who goes off at the Parabolica just as he was on his tail. He pushed too hard, overstepped the mark. He auto crosses through the gravel trap. He rejoins, and I don't think he's going to have lost a position here, and hopefully he's not filled that car with muck. But that is curse the commentator time, Duncan. I was just going to say he was on the cusp, he had the momentum, and then let's see what happens here.
I think he was thinking about the SLS quite a bit, just to get him out of the way as early as possible, but with that, he's just outbraked himself a bit. Just like we said, got the outside wheels on a little bit more of the wetter stuff than normal. And he's out there. It's not nice out there, but at least he didn't hit the barriers, and he can maybe stand a chance of still getting that third, because he was lapping a hell of a lot quicker than Roger Leo.
He only lost 3 seconds to Leo on that lap, despite that mistake. We've got 9 minutes to go, and this could be doable. And it's very rare to see either Marco Holzer or Nick Tandy make a mistake. To see them both make a mistake, same race, I think it shows that these drivers are leaving absolutely no quarter and are pushing very hard. So it's testimony to just how tricky these conditions are. In terms of the GTS class, that is still being led by Marco Mappelli in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche. Second in the class is Michael Dalla Stella, the Kessel Racing Ferrari, and third is the second of the Auto Orlando Porsches in the hands of Marcello Puglisi. A lot of traffic here for Patrick Pilet to contend with. He moves ahead of the Ombra Racing Ferrari of Mario Cordoni. There is the second place car, Raffaele Giammaria, and that gap is ebbing and flowing through the traffic. It still, though, stays beneath the 5-second mark, as 30 laps are now consigned to the history books by Patrick Pilet. And this is another very, very dramatic race, as Pelli and Dalla Stella, that could well have switched in that last lap. They're only 0.4 of a second apart. Season time that went through. Now, what about this fight for third? We're waiting for Federico Leo to come through. So as Patrick Pilet powers away, the fight for the victory is almost certainly. And here is the fight for the Class lead GTS, and they almost all three come together. And it's Dalla Stella who goes into the gravel trap. Oh no, that's such a shame. So it's Marcello Puglisi who moves ahead, and there's damage there for Dalla Stella. He has broken the rear suspension. Problems as well for Marco Mappelli, who's picked up a puncture, not on the tyre we'd have expected, but actually on the rear left. He's got bodywork flailing all over the place. And for their championship, oh, that is such wretched luck for them. It means that Marcello Puglisi leads the GTS class. Second and third is now anybody's bet, as well. The souvenir hounds here at Monza are going to do well for bits of Auto Orlando Porsche, because they're scattered all over the track. Let's take another look at it. So Puglisi had gone through. We see it actually after the incident. The damage had already been done to Dalla Stella. That's what pitched him into that lurid spin. We really needed to see that a few seconds earlier, as Alexander Taukanitsa has a rotation and gets himself going, hopefully. But 3 wide into Lesmos was never going to go. Really, it was a case of there just not being enough space.
No, it was all kicking off, wasn't it? I mean, didn't quite know what happened. It was rather hectic.
It really was. It's very hectic as well for Raffaele Giammaria as he moves ahead of Mario Cordoni. Svalin Guttuso, all the while, is surging up through the field in that black 77 car, and he's actually staying, broadly speaking, in touch with the pace of Patrick Pilet. So Pilet is the only driver now who's got no worries. He's got no traffic around him. He leads the race. He's got just under 6 minutes remaining. Everything is in his pocket. Rafael Di Maria is managing things as he needs to, but Pilet runs a little bit wide, possibly into turn 1, as we take another opportunity to see the remnants of Marco Mapelli's car. The tyre sheds itself. Fortunately, Mapelli has only got about 100 metres to go on the rim there to bring that car into the pits. But the hopes he had have gone. Now, is it beginning to rain out there, I wonder? I think it is, because the lap times have just suddenly gone up and the umbrellas are out. They're all on slicks. There's 5 minutes remaining and the rain is coming down here at Monza, and suddenly all bets are off again. And this is not what Patrick Pilet would have wanted. He's the only driver last time round who went around in under 2 minutes. And this is where you might be wanting to be in a Porsche, because that car has got an awful lot of inherent mechanical grip and traction, which, Duncan, is what you need when the rain comes down and you're on ball tyres.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's sitting pretty here. I mean, he's got a car that creates a lot of grip. Everyone's on slicks. He seems to be absolutely on top of it. So, but I'm pretty sure that's not how he's feeling in there. In there, he's hearing every single noise that's coming from that car. He's thinking everything could potentially go wrong. But he's I don't want to give the curse to the commentator, but let's hope now. I think he's looking good.
I think the other thing is the rain here is not on all parts of the circuit. It's only on some of the corners, so the drivers each and every lap are finding things very tricky, as Marcello Puglisi breaks into second chicane, which is really where we've got the rain, actually out in the woods through Curva Grande, then that second chicane, and then also into the Lesmo. So it's Marcello Puglisi then for Orlando Sport who leads the GTS classification. Andrea Rizzoli. Marco Mapelli is still showing as third, and he now slips down. Stefano Gattuso, what a drive from Gattuso to climb up to third in the GTS classification. That is really quite remarkable, as we're into the penultimate lap of the race. Patrick Pilet leads it by 14.5 seconds from Rafael Di Maria. About the fight for third position, I hear you ask, because Federico Leo has just gone through, and Marco Holzer, we wait. And Holzer, his confidence in that car may have gone, because he lapped to the same pace as Federico Leo. The teams in conference on the pit wall. And they've got this lap and one more to survive. The rain really now would appear, from what we can see on the monitors, be coming down quite heavily on some sections of the circuit. Patrick Pilet, that doesn't stop him riding the curb, does it, at Lesmo? He's enjoying himself, and he has, on that last lap again, just shows what form Pilet's in today, Duncan. He was 6 seconds quicker than Di Maria.
That's not just a little bit, I mean, that's a huge amount. Obviously just feeling totally at home.
Oh, and sorry, Duncan, Federico Leo's had the problem, and Marco Holzer does go through into third position, so the championship fight is back on, and Holzer, against all the odds, has been able to jump up into third, and he was a long way back from Leo, 7.5 seconds at the start of the lap, as they pick their way past a crawling Klaus Hummel, and this race has just totally turned on its head in these later stages. We've still got laps to go, and Hummel is going to a grind to walk on the track here now. Well, here's what happened to Leo. Oh, it's a spin. He rode the curbs, got on the rumble strip, white lines, no grip, and around he went. And given we've only got 3 races to go in the championship after this, that moment could have been absolutely crucial.
I mean, that potentially is just decided the championship, you know, so it's a pretty big mistake to make, unfortunately, but it is easy to do when you've got the painted lines and it's just started to rain. You've got slicks, everything says don't touch the curbs, and he's made that mistake.
And Juan Manuel Lopez wasn't too far back either, so wrong to the last lap of the race. It is Patrick Pilet who leads, en route to claim, if he is to make it to the finish, which, given these conditions, is not guaranteed, the IMSA Performance Macbooks team here in Ram on the Rack's first victory of the season, and Pile very tentative through the second chain, and that's how it should be done, Duncan. He knew he wasn't going to make the apex. He just ran off the brakes, nothing too silly, steady pace through the corner. And now we've got Klaus Hummel's car, which is stranded out after the second of Lesmos, double wave yellow flags, and that McLaren didn't seem in a hurry. Oh, he's stuck right on the circuit, and this is utterly treacherous on the last lap of the race. The Lapidus racer McLaren is stranded on the track, fortunately far enough away from the exit of the corner. There is Ram on the rack waiting on the pit wall. The clock is going to tick to 0 before Patrick Pile crosses the finish line. And once again, the 2012 season from the International GT Open has thrown up the most dramatic of races. You just could not have guessed which way it was going to go. But it's Patrick Pile who powers along towards the Parabolica for the final time. The IMSA Performance Macbook team, his co-driver Ram on the rack, waits on the pit wall, tiptoeing then through the Parabolica for the final time. The clock has ticked to 0, and it's Patrick Pile and Ram on the rack who are going to claim a remarkable victory in the 13th race of the 2012 season. And they will be overjoyed with that. It's been a stunning drive from Pile since taking over at the cockpit, but who is going to get second? Because the track is increasingly treacherous, and Marco Holzer, lights ablaze, charging along the back straight. I don't think he's in touch with Gianmaria, no. He's got Federico Leo and Juan Manuel Lopez looming very large. So Marco, be careful through the Parabolica for the final time. Gianmaria is over the line in second. So here Miguel Ramos claims second, and Marco Holzer and Nick Tandy against all the odds in the Manthey Racing Porsche. They started in 11th. They've both had an off-track excursion, but they claim third here at Monza, with fourth going to Federico Leo and Jimmy Bruni in the AF Course Ferrari, fifth to Juan Manuel Lopez and Andrea Montermini. And what about the GTS class? Well, here is the class leader, Marcello Puglisi, in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche. He and Matteo Beretta are en route to, again, claiming a class victory that you really wouldn't have predicted, even with just a third of the race to go. So around the Parabolica comes Marcello Puglisi. These conditions so difficult for the drivers, and Puglisi winds up the throttle, accelerates through to the flag, and he claims the class win. Well, Duncan, it's been a long time since I can think of an end to a race as dramatic as that, with the whole field out on slick tyres as the rain comes down with 5 minutes to go.
Yeah, it was, you know, like I said, just pretty much all over the place. I don't quite know how it all kicked off. I mean, the weather obviously played a huge part, but every position looked like it was all fairly stable, and people kept making some mistakes. So anything can happen in motorsport.
It really can. Auto Orlando Sport, they've been up all night, but it's the car they weren't repairing that won the class. So let's take a look then at the final results, with the victory for Ram on the rack and Patrick Pile. Second place to Miguel Ramos and Rafael Gianmaria. Third place to Marco Holzer and Nick Tandy. Fourth, Federico Leo and Jimmy Bruni. Fifth, Andrea Montermini and Juan Manuel Lopez. Sixth, Diodoric Shetov and Emanuele Moncini. Seventh to Alvaro Barber and Matteo Malicelli. Victory in the GTS class for Matteo Beretta and Marcello Puglisi from Stefano Bizzarri and Andrea Rizzoli. And then third in the class going to Stefano Gattuso after a remarkable drive, him and Marco Zannottini. Even with the difficult conditions, it was actually a race that was very, very low on casualties and attrition, although Klaus Hummel, a late retirement in the Lapidus Racing McLaren fastest lap as well, went to Patrick Pile. In terms of the Drivers' Championship, it swings back to Marco Holzer and Nick Tandy. 3 points their advantage over Federico Leo and Jimmy Bruni. They may feel that's one that got away. In third place, Malicelli and Barber. They, though, have both lost ground on the leaders. So into part ferme comes Patrick Pile. He is overjoyed with that. But Duncan, from a driver's point of view, a race like this, just utterly exhausting mentally.
It really is, because you have to think of everything. You know, you've got to think of line, you've got to look after your car, you've got traffic to contend with. Then it starts to rain again, you know, and you've got to go back to what you were doing at the beginning, but you've got slicks on, so you don't really know how the car reacts. So yeah, absolutely draining. And one that you'd be very, very happy to get over the line and take that victory.
Just a remarkable race, and the Rack and Pile overjoyed. Celebration as well for Gattuso and Zanatini, and Stefano Gattuso, arguably the driver of the race. He was on the pace of the overall race leader in that GTS Ferrari for much of the latter stages of the race. Rafael Giamria and Miguel Ramos, their rich vein of form continues in the Corvette, and they are now fully vindicated in having made that decision mid-season to switch from the Ferrari to the Corvette. And then third place for Marco Holzer and Nick Tandy. They will have been very, very pleased to have got that result. For Federico Leo and Jimmy Bruni, though, Duncan, they may just feel that could be one that got away from them, because they were in full command of the race. The weather conditions conspired against them a little bit, but that spin, Federico Leo will look back on that and think, why did I push so hard through the chicane?
I mean, he knew it was starting to spit. It was only going to get worse, and you know, as a driver in those conditions, you stay away from the curb. So, yeah, definitely one that got away for them, and you know, it's a shame for Bruni as well, because the first stint was just sensational, and you know, Federico Leo really didn't feel that comfortable.
Well,
in those conditions.
Let's take a look then at the highlights from what was a remarkable race. As the field surged down on a wet track towards turn one, it was Jimmy Bruni who had the early advantage. Everybody else jostled for position. We were treated to a battle royal for 5th position onwards for all of the first half of the race, as the track began to dry out. The Super GT cars begun to pick their way up through the field past the GTS runners. It wasn't without a few adventures for most of the drivers, as their wet tyres begun to get very, very hot, very second hand. We saw lots of cars slipping wide. When the pit window opened, first in was Archie Hamilton to hand over to Marco Mappelli, as they looked to challenge for GTS victory in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche. In the meantime, though, their teammate, Matteo Beretta, stayed out a little bit deeper into his stint to hand over to Marcello Puglisi, as Alexander Tanknitzer had a spin. The last man into the pits, though, was the leader for all of the first 40 minutes of the race, Jimmy Bruni, to hand over to Federico Leo, and Leo fed out in the lead just ahead of Patrick Pile. Pile then pounced, a super move, sprinting towards the Lesmo complex to put him into the lead, and then a couple of corners later, Federico Leo's second place turned to third as Rafael Giamria squeezed through on the run to Ascari. The stage was then set for the battle between Giamria and Pile. Patrick Pile, though, pushed oh so hard. GTS was equally close. This was the moment that decided who was going to win the class, when Marcello Puglisi, Marco Mappelli and Michael Dallastella tangled. For Mappelli and Dallastella, it was unfortunately the end of their chances. Then Federico Leo spun from third as the drizzle came down the latter stages. That promoted Marco Holzer onto the podium, but Patrick Pile was able to keep a cool head as the rain worsened, and he and Ramon Narak claimed their first victory of the season, forming very, very strongly in the Insert Performance Matmut Porsche. Well, if you're watching us on the live stream here, www.live.gtopen.net, then join us tomorrow for the second race of the weekend. It gets underway at 13:35 local time here in Monza. And as ever, if you've got any questions for us that you'd like us to put to the drivers overnight, then do tweet to us to either at Ben Commentator or at Duncan Tappy, and we'll be more than happy to talk to the drivers overnight and answer any questions that you have for us in advance of tomorrow's race, which, as I say, you'll be able to watch here live on the web stream in full HD on www.live.gtopen.net. That race starts at 1:35. Onto the podium then, Marco Holzer and Nick Tandy. I think relief more than anything there, Duncan.
Yeah, you definitely see that in the back. Almost a bit of a surprise. You know, they both made a couple of mistakes, but a podium is well earned.
And then Rafael Giamria and Miguel Ramos before the race winners, Patrick Pile and Ramon Narak. It's all smiles as the rain worsens here at Monza. The national anthem rings out.
diretta.
Drivers getting drenched then on the podium here in Monza as the rain progressively worsens, but the presentation of the trophies, very nice trophies this weekend. Monza Circuit celebrating its 90th year. Nick Tandy may stop smiling sometime tomorrow with that third position. Rafael Gianmaria and Miguel Ramos then runners up, and our race winners Ramon Narak and Patrick Pilet. Pair of them unsurprisingly beaming, and also representative from the IMSA Performance Macbeth team. As the champagne flies here on the podium at Monza, and the drivers celebrating a very hard day's racing. Just thank goodness, Duncan, this rain held off until the checkered flag.
Yeah, it's absolutely torrential now, almost so much so that they have had to run the safety cars, so they're not pleasant.
Let's take a look then at some of the slow motion shots of our podium finishers. Marco Holzer riding the curbs, Rafael Gianmaria and Miguel Ramos. Well, their season gets better and better. You just wonder if they'd been in the Corvette for the entire campaign, whether they would be in with a sniff of the championship. And then Patrick Pilet and Ramon Narak, they've been so consistent all year, but this was their day to shine. It was a super drive, in particular from Patrick Pilet, and the way that he just turned it on for that stint. Saw he had a chance of winning. It was just utterly ruthless and spectacular.
It really was very aggressive as well, you know, really going for the curbs, really, you know, taking off on all of them. But you know, he reaped the rewards of that and came out one.
The deluge continues here at Monza as we have the celebrations of the GTS class podium. So in third place, Marco Zanartini and Stefano Gattuso. What a drive. Second place, Andrea Rizzoli and Stefano Bizzarri. And then at GTS class winners, Marcello Puglisi and Matteo Beretta. A very, very popular home victory for the Auto Orlando Sport team after a very tricky race for them, and the GTS battle, Duncan, was equally fierce.
It was quite interesting to keep a look at on that through the race, because you know, you could see that Mapelli was really pumping in some incredible lap times, and then he's picked up the damage, so it's a shame for him and Archie, but no, it was Puglisi that picked it up in the end.
Well, that's the way that motor racing often is, that some days you get the luck and some days you don't. So the drivers celebrating here on the podium at Monza. That means that it's just about time from Duncan Tappy and myself, Ben Evans, to say goodbye for a very, very wet Monza, and we look forward to you joining us tomorrow for the 14th round of the 2012 International GT Open.